the Shout Loud podcast, bringing the artists you love onto your headphones.
It's the 24th of October and I'm sitting here with Muncie Girls in Wiesbaden. How are you doing?
Good. Sehr gut.
Good, really good. Really, really good.
Nice. So, first of all, when you ask the next question, introduce yourself so our listeners can recognize your voice. You've added some shows like today's in Wiesbaden later than others on your current tour. Why not all at once?
Just how it worked out. We needed to get some shows announced, so we did, and the rest of the tour wasn't booked. So now, then, when it was booked, we announced them. That's it. That's all there is to it.
Okay, so how's the tour going so far?
It's been great. Like, this is I think we've done a bunch of shows in Germany and one in Antwerp, and they've all been quite a lot busier. I'm Landy, by the way. I play guitar and sing. So now you know who I am. And yeah, it's been really, really fun. Like, this is the second leg of the tour. The first leg was in the UK. But we love coming to Germany. It's awesome. So we're really happy to be back.
Okay, so the tour follows the release of your second album, Fixed Ideals, which was released at the end of August. What are the differences between Fixed Ideals and your debut from Caplan To Belsize?
Hello, my name is Luke and I play the drums. The differences between the records, I mean, that's quite a difficult question. Because, like, in some ways, we put the record together quite using, like, a similar method, I guess. But in other ways, it was actually really different. Because we recorded the whole record with the same producer in the same studio. But because it's the cliche that everyone always says, like, your first full-length record, you have your whole life to write it. And then your second one, you only have, like a year or 2 years. So I guess all the songs were put together in a shorter amount of time. I felt like we probably put the record together in a shorter time frame, but it was a little bit more intense. For example, we would sort of, throughout the 2 years before recording the record, this is number 2, by the way, Fixed Ideals, we sort of booked out times where we would get together and we would just, like, either sit down or, like, get in a practice space and, like, hash out ideas. And I think, from my perspective anyway, with a lot of the songs, they came together in a way that we were less critical of what we were doing. I think we were a little bit more open-minded to ideas, and rather than writing a song and thinking it has to sound this way because that's how we want it to sound or how we think other people will perceive it, we thought, that sounds kind of cool, let's just, like, record it and then decide later if we want it. And I think that made the record a little bit more diverse sonically.
Okay, so which topics do you want to address, and to what extent have you come to terms with personal experiences on the record?
Well, do you mean want to address, like, right now? Or what topics were addressed in the record?
Yeah, what topics do you address with Fixed Ideals?
Well, there's a few topics. It's kind of similar to do you want me to just take this? Similar to the first record. There's a lot of, like, politics, especially in terms of, like, in the UK, we have, like, a conservative government. So it's quite right wing, and there's a lot of like conversation and just issues around, like, austerity, and kind of class issues. So there's a couple of songs that kind of talk a little bit about that. But yeah, I guess there's also, it's quite a personal record. But so's the first one. But I think this one is a little bit more intense, maybe. There's also more space between the instrumentation and the vocals. So I think almost the lyrics are quite, like, laid bare, and there's a lot of points where it strips down to guitar and lyrics, and it's not just, like, constantly, like, full band all the time. So I think it's just a little bit more, I don't know, I'm being a bit more open about the topics, I suppose. But yeah, kind of just personal issues. Like, there's a lot of issues around friendship and relationships. There's stuff about, like, family and politics within family, and there's a bit about like mental health, and I suppose, yeah, in the UK we have the NHS, so it's kind of, there's a song Clinic which kind of talks a little bit about waiting times with the NHS, and which again feeds back to like the austerity thing. So it's kind of, but it's talking about mental health, like we're trying to be a little bit open about it. Obviously everyone's hopping on that bandwagon, but just talking about things that, you know, often have been difficult to talk about, I suppose, trying to be more open with it.
Yeah, I think it's also very important that you are creating a safe space with your music on your concerts, and I totally think that you are doing this, and that's very good and important that musicians are doing this. On Fixed Ideals, there's also a song called Bubble Bath, which is accompanied by bubbles. How did this topic and the bubble sound come about?
I'll take this one. Yeah, so basically we're in the studio and had the idea for the Bubble Bath song quite a number of years ago. I've always wanted to recreate a bathroom scenario within a song. So the idea is that the listener is taken into the bathroom. When they listen to it and they close their eyes, they can imagine they're in the bath. And then we just decided to get a cup, fill it with water, get a straw, and then blow into it and just create these bubbles. And we recorded it, and a bit of reverb on that sounds really good, I think. It's my favourite part of the record. It's my favourite instrument. I played quite a few instruments on that record. That is by far my favourite, and my proudest moment as well is when those bubbles come in.
Yeah, I totally agree. It was very great to hear it for the first time. Yeah, nice idea. Before you released your debut, you released a series of EPs. Is this the best way to avoid jumping into the cold on the first record? Who wants to answer?
I think it's a good way to sort of feel out where you want to go with your band. I think in those like early stages of being in a band, an EP is just like a really good, it's a little bit less committal than a full length record. And to be honest, we didn't even think about it. We didn't think like, okay, let's do a few EPs and then we'll be ready to do an album. We just probably didn't have enough money to record an album, and we didn't think very far ahead into the future. So once we had 5 songs that we liked, we just went to the studio and recorded them. You know, it wasn't thought through any further than that. But looking back on it now, or if I was to start a whole new band, I think it is a good way to sort of work out the direction that you want to go sonically as a band, because looking back on our, you know, first couple of EPs sounds very different to our latest record, obviously. So the EPs are quite a good way to sort of navigate your way through sounding a little bit shit, and then you're like, okay, now we actually like how we sound and we want to write a collection of songs that will fit on a record, rather than just let's just record what we've got.
Okay, so let's get into the political issues. You're from Britain, and I think everybody knows that there are some huge issues called the Brexit. What do you think about how much Brexit will affect the music scene, for example, on tours?
Anyone?
It's hard. It's hard to say, really, because it hasn't fully happened yet. It's definitely a worry, because like Landy said earlier, like we love coming to Germany or anywhere on like mainland Europe where we've been before. It's such a special place for us to come and tour, and every band that you will ever talk to ever. So it's like, it's such a worry that coming here won't be, or potentially won't be, as easy as it has been for us. So yeah, like it's definitely a worry for us. I don't know what it will entail when Brexit goes through, if it definitely does go through. But if it means coming between, you know, free travel between countries on mainland Europe is more difficult for us, then it's going to really change touring for UK bands and any bands from outside of mainland Europe, or who, you know, countries that aren't within the EU. So I hope it doesn't get too difficult for us, but if it does, it's going to be hard, and it's going to affect the music industry, and it's going to stop certain bands coming to mainland Europe because bands like us don't make any money. We've just sorted out finally our working visas to go to America in a couple of weeks, and it's just like, it's so expensive and it's so difficult, and if we have to go through half of that just to travel, you know, a few hours away from where we live, and then if you have to get separate visas for different, like, it's just going to be really difficult. And I think the touring music industry is difficult as it is for bands with making no money. And if that gets more difficult, I think you'll see less bands making the effort, which would be really sad, and it'll be a real shame, I think. Anyone else, do you have anything to add?
No.
We don't want it to happen, basically, and we're upset by it.
I totally agree. Yeah. Londi, the next question is primarily addressed to you. A few months ago, as part of the Key Change initiative, 45 festivals announced that they would have as many men and women perform at their events by 2022. Is this the right way to counter the male-dominated music landscape?
It's a good question. I think it's definitely a good way to do it, because obviously, like, that's addressing the kind of people who have the power to do those things. Like, sort of often it is like older, sort of middle-aged men who own and run these festivals. They have every power to just say, I'm gonna decide who gets booked, and that the bands that are getting booked are going to be women. But I don't think that alone is going to solve the problem that we kind of have with, like, kind of a gender imbalance in the music industry and within scenes as well. Because I think that, like, essentially, like, that would work, and in terms of, like, obviously girls and non-boys just need to be able to see other women on stage so that they understand that they have permission to do those things and start bands and stuff. But I don't think that, like, just like, people put so much onus on festival lineups, like, it reflects the scene and it reflects the industry so much. But I don't necessarily agree, because, like, festivals are just a snippet of, like, some bands only play festivals, do you know what I mean? Whereas, like, when you go to club shows, if you attend gigs all the time, or you're involved in, like, putting on bands in the scene or whatever, it's such a different thing to just going to a festival, and it's definitely not reflected in festival lineups. So I think the problem really needs to be sorted out within scenes as well. Like, this is like this is one side of the corporate problem getting solved by one side of the corporate people, do you know what I mean? Whereas, like, actually what's going on from when bands start and they start playing shows to when they get to the point where they can play festivals and they have that platform, there's so much that needs to happen on, like, a grassroots level. And there are so many, like, awesome things happening, like workshops in England. Loads of workshops are starting up for, like, there's, like, first timers, Eat Up Collective. We do a workshop in Exeter called School of Rock, and they're all these things to try and start involving, like, queer people, women, non-binary people, trans people that don't feel as though they've had permission to start bands before, to get involved with that. And I think those are the kind of ways that we're going to get more bands at that level, because they need to be encouraged right at the bottom as well.
All right, I think that's a good end for the interview. Thank you for your time, and enjoy the rest of your tour.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. If you'd like to stay informed about your favorite artists, then go check us out on our website or social media. The links are in the description box. Cheers, and until next time.